So after 5 years of peace, my ex-wife returns begging for forgiveness. But her secret betrayal with my parents changed everything. My ex-wife Angela, 36, and I, 37, male, had met when we were in our mid-20s, when I was around 24. We were working at the same firm, and that's how we met. After being in a relationship for 2 years, we got married, and within 3 years of our marriage, we had 2 daughters, now 9 and 7 years old. Second pregnancy was unexpected and she wasn't happy about it, but she didn't terminate it, even though I had told her that it would be okay with me if she did, since I didn't want to put her through anything that she didn't want. After our first daughter, things were still great between us and we were as in love as we could be. But that changed after the second pregnancy. She became really moody and irritable and constantly picked on me or our eldest. But I just figured that this was because of all the hormones and stuff and tried to make my peace with this new version of Angela. We thought that this would change after a while, but things just got progressively worse, and my daughter and I learned to walk on eggshells around her. So I was taking care of everything, even though she was supposed to be a stay-at-home mom. She had quit her job of her own volition after our first kid and did all the work around the house along with taking care of our eldest while I worked, until she got pregnant for a second time. So we had to hire a housekeeper while she was pregnant because she said that she was too tired to do the work around the house along with looking after our kids. I agreed, even though it was slightly out of our budget since I wasn't earning enough at the time. So I agreed to hire a housekeeper because I didn't want to inconvenience Angela, especially while she was pregnant. I assumed that she would return to looking after the house and kids during the day after our second daughter was born. Also, let me just make it clear that I wasn't one of those husbands who didn't do anything around the house. After coming back from work, I did whatever I could to help out, even though I used to be exhausted from working. After she gave birth to our younger daughter, I thought that she would take a few months, but then she would bounce back and we could go back to our normal lives. But several months passed and she showed no signs of changing. She remained just as cranky and irritable and refused to do any work around the house. She would just sit at home all day and watch television. She didn't even play with the kids or anything and would pay our neighbor to take them out to the park occasionally. But I don't mean to sound resentful, but I did feel that way because I was slogging at work day and night. And she wouldn't even do the bare minimum at home. It was also proving quite expensive for me to pay for a housekeeper to do all the cooking, cleaning, and other miscellaneous household chores. I had to take care of all the other expenses as well, and I wanted to save money for our daughter's future too. That was becoming almost impossible because Angela refused to help me out in any way. So after almost 6 months since our younger daughter's birth, I decided that we couldn't go on like this and I had to talk to Angela. So I knew that this was going to be a difficult discussion, so I asked my parents to watch our daughters for one day and they agreed. That day I sat Angela down and I told her that I knew she was tired after 2 pregnancies, but I needed her to help me out here and work with me. I explained to her that having a housekeeper was becoming too expensive for us and I needed her to honor her word and go back to doing at least some of the household chores, so we could renegotiate and lower the housekeeper's salary and save some money. She was opposed to the idea and said no to it instantly because she said that she was too busy watching the kids do any of the work around the house and that I should start earning more instead of making up excuses and blaming her for my financial condition. I tried to tell her that I was doing my best already, but she had to do her best as well if we wanted to make this marriage work. I also brought up how she wasn't really looking after the kids, because as far as I knew, she would just let them watch television with her, and they would sit with her for hours while she watched tacky reality TV. This is what the housekeeper had once mentioned to me conversationally. Soon realized that bringing that up was a huge mistake because she flared up and accused me of spying on her through the housekeeper. She went on a tirade against me after that and said that she was not going to stand this anymore, that she was done being pushed around by me and being forced to do all the work while I did nothing except sit at a desk for a few hours every day. She then told me that this was my fault that I couldn't afford to have a housekeeper, and that it was a shame that I had to beg her to help me out since I was supposed to be the man of the house. It was all really illogical, and she was just grasping at straws to somehow make it seem like there was nothing wrong with her not doing anything all day, and I was the crazy one for expecting her to actually contribute and pull her weight around the house. We ended up getting into a massive fight, and she called me a loser who couldn't afford to be with a woman like her anyway. And I retaliated by calling her a lazy cow who had already failed at being a good mother, given how scared our eldest daughter was of her, and now she was failing at being a wife as well. That remark really got to her and she shoved me really hard. So I lost my balance and fell back on the coffee table very hard, shattering the glass and hurting myself. So I had to be rushed to the ER and she kept apologizing to me and crying throughout. Luckily, it was just my back that was hurt, and it was all just surface-level injuries, but I could have seriously hurt myself and I didn't trust Angela anymore. I told her that she had to move out because I didn't trust her around kids since there was no telling when she might lose her temper around them and end up hurting them as well. I told my parents to take care of our daughters until Angela was there, and for a week, she kept protesting and said that she would never let this happen again. But I just didn't trust her anymore. I almost filed for a divorce, but she begged me to give her a chance, and by the end of the week, we had come to the conclusion she was going to go live with her parents for some time and undergo therapy. Only when she had been given a clean chip by a medical professional would I allow her to move back in with us. There was obviously something very wrong with her, because happy people don't act that way, but she was willing to work on it and get better. I also didn't want my daughters to grow up without their mother, so I agreed not to get divorced just then and give our marriage a second shot. We were also getting marriage counseling while we were living separately, but eventually, it all turned out to be useless because she ended up cheating on me. For my parents had moved in with me to help out with my daughters while Angela was living with her parents. And we went to marriage counseling sessions weekly, and things seemed to be getting better for a while. I was also in touch with her therapist, who told me that she had been suffering from postpartum depression, but she was getting better. One of her symptoms had been intense anger issues, which she didn't have before. So it got way out of control when she shoved me, and that was a wake-up call for both of us. This went on for almost a year, and around the 6-month mark, I even allowed her to visit our daughters under my supervision. She was slowly becoming her old self again, and I was glad to see that. It finally felt like our situation was improving and we could actually make it work. But then all of a sudden, she stopped coming to our counseling sessions without any explanation. She also stopped responding to me, but I knew that she was making progress since her therapist kept me updated. It didn't make sense to me, and for weeks I kept trying to talk to her, but she would just blow me off and say that she wanted some time to herself. Finally, after almost 3 months of her avoiding me, I decided to pay her a visit to her parents' place. I hadn't done that earlier because her parents didn't like me and blamed me because they believed that I was the one who had driven their daughter crazy and made her act out like that. So she had told me that it would be better if I didn't visit her while she was living with them, since that would just lead to a lot of drama, and that's definitely the last thing that we needed. But I broke that rule and visited them anyway, since she had been acting distant and blowing off counseling sessions. Even when she would show up occasionally, she would seem uninterested, and I just couldn't make sense of it. When I tried to talk to her in person, on the phone, or even on text, she would tell me that it was all fine. But I could make out from her behavior that there was certainly something that she was hiding from me. The day that I showed up at her parents' house, I expected her to be at home, but she wasn't there. When I asked her parents where she was, they told me that they weren't allowed to tell me and slammed the door shut on my face. I could tell that they were enjoying this, and I had a bad feeling about it, so I decided to call Angela while standing in front of her parents' house. I tried calling her several times, but she didn't pick up, and I was getting more and more paranoid by the second, so I decided to sneak around the house and somehow get inside by myself. I went around to the backyard because I knew that her parents usually kept the kitchen door open, but I didn't even need to go that far because I spotted Angela sitting on the swing that her parents had in their backyard. The bad news was that she was sitting with her back to me because he was making out with a man that I didn't recognize. It's been a long time since I saw them, but it's imprinted in my brain, because it was the most horrible moment of my life, and I haven't been able to forget it even today. The guy that she was making out with drew back as soon as he saw me, and by the time Angela turned around, I had already started walking back to my car. She caught up with me and tried to stop me, but I wasn't hearing anything that she was saying because I was in shock. She tried to grab me, but I shook her off and told her not to touch me. So she didn't, and I went back to my car and started driving back home. So I blocked her everywhere as soon as I got home so she wouldn't have a chance to explain, and told my parents that I wanted them to look for a lawyer for me and inform them of what I had just witnessed when I visited Angela's parents' house. So I didn't see her or hear from her until we had to meet with the court-appointed mediator for our divorce settlement. I had pretty much turned into a robot by that point and was just functioning for the sake of my daughters, but I had completely shut down emotionally. I didn't feel anything even when I found out that Angela was terminating her parental rights because she had made up her mind that she didn't want to be with us anymore, that she wanted to be with the guy, let's call him Sean, that I saw her with the other day. He was her childhood friend, and while they had grown apart after high school ended, they had reconnected when she moved back in with her parents, and she had apparently fallen in love with him. Her parents also supported this, which is probably why they had been right about her making out with him in their backyard despite being a married woman with 2 kids. Apparently, they had always wanted her to end up with Sean, and they were happy that Angela was finally choosing herself and her own happiness, as if she had ever been capable of doing anything other than that. The divorce was a long process because even though she she had been cheating on me, she still wanted to qualify for alimony. It took us a while, but my lawyer and I fought hard and made sure that she didn't get anything in the divorce, because it was all rightfully mine. Since I had been the one paying for everything for so long while she did nothing but watch television at home, it has been 5 years since the divorce finally came through, and we succeeded in our goal to make sure that she walked away with nothing. The months in which I was dealing with the divorce were some of the hardest times for me, but I knew that I couldn't break because I had to look after my daughter since they had nobody except for me. My parents were obviously really helpful and supportive, and I can't ever thank them enough for being there for me throughout, while I juggle work and taking care of my kids. It has been 5 years since, and even though back then the divorce seemed like the worst thing that could possibly happen to me, I'm thankful for it now, because I don't think I would have been in the place that I am today had it not been for my decision to leave Angela. Life has really treated me well since then, and I'm in a much better place now in every respect. We have since moved into a bigger house because I get paid better now and I don't have to spend money on anyone apart from myself and my daughters. My parents live close by and drop in from time to time as well. I have friends who love me and my daughters are as happy as can be. That's all that a man needs, and I'm so thankful to the universe that it's all going well for me now. Or it was until Angela showed up again a few days ago. The kids were at school and I was just about to leave for work when I opened the door rang and Angela was standing outside with a boy beside her. The boy couldn't have been older than 3 or 4 years old, and I knew that this had to be Angela's son. So I was taken by surprise when I saw her standing outside my door and was still trying to process it when she started crying and said that she was here to apologize and make things right with me. She told me that she was finally ready to be a family again and give our marriage another chance. I couldn't believe that she was back here after all these years, and now she wanted to give our marriage another chance, like it was up to her to make that decision. Within a split second, I made up my mind and decided to shut the door and turn her away because I didn't want to get into whatever this was. But before that, I told her that this was not her family anymore. I had stopped being her husband the day she cheated on me with saying the divorce was just a legal obligation, and she herself had given up custody of her daughters, so now she had no right to refer to us as her family. After I said that, I shut the door and told her to go away because I didn't want her anywhere near my property. So I would have cursed her out as well because I was really angry, but I refrained from doing that because of the little boy. So I could hear her wailing outside my door for a couple of minutes after I shut her out, but I decided to ignore it, and once I made sure the coast was clear, I went off to work. I tried really hard not to think about it because that would just weaken my resolve and I couldn't afford to let that happen. So I almost succeeded in forgetting that Angela had even showed up at my house. But as soon as I came back home from work, I received a call from my parents demanding an explanation as to why I had turned her away. They told me that Angela had contacted them after I turned her away and shut the door on her face, and she had been devastated. My parents said that they were the ones who had given her my new address and told me to visit me since she was in the process of getting divorced from Sean and finally had a chance to make things right with me. They told me that Angela had reached out to them about a month ago and this had been in the works for quite some time. So my parents believed that it was about time that I thought about my kids because my daughters needed a mother and there was no better mother than Angela. So they decided that she deserved another chance and told her where to find me and what to say to me. So I got really mad at them because it was not their place to forgive her and decided to give her another chance without even asking me if I would be okay with that. So it could have been really bad if the kids had been at home, and it was really reckless of them to pull something like this. So I told them off, but they refused to acknowledge that they had made a mistake because they had helped me during my divorce by taking care of the kids. And even now, occasionally they do look after the kids and they believe that whether or not I wanted to patch up with Angela was up to me. But they had an equal right to decide what was best for the kids, and I couldn't take that away from them. So I thought it was ridiculous of them to believe that because at the end of the day, they were my daughters and not theirs. And while I respected them and would always be thankful for what they did for me during my divorce, I don't think it was their place to let Angela back into my life again. And we got into a bit of a fight, but they told me that I was the one who was out of line here and was being selfish by not giving Angela another chance. They told me that they had done their due diligence and were sure that she was a different woman now and deserved to be a part of my daughter's lives, even when I reminded them that she had signed her rights away. They said that it was insulting that I believed they would put my daughter or me in harm's way, and accused me of ruining their lives by being too arrogant to accept that they needed their mother. It's been a few days now, and I don't think I was out of line or selfish because I've thought about this a lot. For not giving my ex-wife a second chance at being a mother. Update 1. About a week has passed since Angela showed up at my door with her son, and recently I found out the truth about her relationship with my parents. It's honestly so disturbing that I don't even know where to begin, and I'm still struggling to process it myself. It's mind-boggling how all of them have betrayed me without batting an eye. Apparently not only were they the ones who had told her my new address, but they had been in touch with her all along. I had cut her out of my life after the divorce, but they hadn't because they believed that she would come around at some point. They wouldn't talk much, only once a month maybe. But that was enough for me to feel betrayed. Sean had made Angela sign away her rights after she was sold with the divorce papers and had given her an ultimatum and found a family and make a new life with him, for she could keep in touch with her kids and fight for their custody, but that would mean that she would have to leave him behind. It had been a difficult choice for her to make, according to my parents, but she ended up going with Sean to make a new family with him instead of sticking with the family that she already had. My parents said that Angela had contacted them shortly after I filed for divorce to tell them about her situation and asked them to help her because she wanted to still stay in contact with her kids privately. She had told them that she had been backed into a corner by both of us and either way she wouldn't be able to see her kids. Because I had been fighting for full custody with supervised visitation rights while Sean had instructed her to abandon her kids altogether. Even if she did fight for custody and went against Sean, the chances of her getting partial custody were slim given the circumstances of our divorce or her history of having issues controlling her temper. So fighting for custody seemed like a waste of her time and resources. There was a very real chance that she could lose both Shawnee and custody of our daughters in the end, if she decided to fight. And that's where my parents came in. She met them in private and practically begged them to let her stay in touch with her daughters and help her out by acting as the bridge between them. She was aware that once she signed her rights away, she would not have any visiting rights, let alone supervision. But my parents would, and they planned on exploiting that. They successfully did so and fooled me for ages by going behind my back to allow Angela to meet our daughters. And they did so because Angela's situation struck a chord with them and they realized that they couldn't, in good conscience, keep a mother apart from her kids. Stabbing their own son in the back for years, however, didn't hurt their conscience one bit. They told me that whenever I would drop our kids off at their house, they would invite Angela over and let her spend time with them. So my kids never told me that they were meeting their mom because my parents would bribe them with toys and candy so they would keep their mouths shut about this. Anytime I would ask them about what they had done at their grandparents' house, my daughters would tell me that they played games with my grandparents and their friend. So I always assumed that they must be talking about my parents' actual friends whom I already knew, but apparently, that's what my parents had told my daughters to refer to their mother in case I asked them about their day. I couldn't believe that my daughters had been lying to me as well, but I forgave them because they're just kids. And also because Angela and my parents had really manipulated and intimidated them into keeping quiet. So after I learned the truth from my parents, when I asked my daughters if they had been meeting their mother behind my back, they started crying and told me that they couldn't tell me because they would be punished by God if they did. So Angela and my parents must have really drilled it into their heads that there would be dire consequences if they told me the truth. And that's why they had been so secretive and vague all along. I also felt like a terrible father for never asking my daughters which friends of my parents they were spending time with, because it just as easily could have been someone else. Someone more dangerous than Angela, and I never would have found out. But I'm going to put an end to it now since I'm getting a restraining order against all of them. I already have written proof of this, since my parents sent an email to me to tell me the truth a couple of days after my fight with them. They had believed that the email was going to make me realize how desperate Angela was to remain a mother to her daughters without losing the alleged love of her life. And that would somehow make me forgive everyone involved, but all that it did was make me realize that everyone here was a nasty little liar, and I couldn't trust anybody anymore. It's also ironic how Angela signed away her parental rights and had to resort to meeting our kids in secret like it was a crime. All because Sean didn't want her to have any contact with her previous family, and he was supposed to be her one true love, but now even they were never divorced, and all that turned out to be for nothing. Anyway, they even had a son together, but according to my parents, Sean wanted nothing to do with her or his kid now because he had received a job offer and was moving away in a couple of months. Angela had started working again recently and their son had started kindergarten here, so she didn't want to move with him, which is why they had been fighting for a long time. So it had finally all come to a head 3 months ago when Sean told her that he was done and he was taking that job and moving out. He didn't have any interest in being a family man anymore because it clearly meant that he would have to sacrifice his own future and happiness just to make her happy, and he wasn't ready to do that. This was all meant to make me feel sorry for Angela, but the only purpose that it served was making me feel like justice had finally been served. I have already spoken to my lawyer and the petition for the restraining orders has been filed. So my daughters and I have also had a proper discussion about all of this, and I have told them that moving forward they will never be seeing their grandparents or their mother again. And they seem to be okay with it for now, but we are still going to go to therapy and try to work things out. Because I'm sure that this is going to be difficult for them and probably has been quite difficult for them for the past 5 years. But this all ends now. Update 2. Hey guys, thank you so much for all the concern and support here. I'm really grateful that so many people have been sending lovely messages and blessings to my daughters. My parents and Angela have been served with restraining orders and are supposed to appear in court in a few days. I don't know how they feel about any of this because I have blocked them on every possible platform, and I've also told my friends not to speak to them in case they contact them. So I have also amped up the security around my house and have been working from home for a couple of days. I had spoken to my daughter's school authorities and told them about the situation too. Initially, I didn't end on letting go to school for a few days, but I didn't want their education to suffer because of Angela and my parents. So now teachers are supposed to keep an eye on them and not let anyone apart from me pick them up after school. I'm doing everything in my power to make sure that they can't get to us because I'm sure that they will try. So far it's been good, and I'm hoping that after we get that restraining order, they still continue to stay away. Date 3. Hi, so this is going to be a really short update, but we got that restraining order, and for the next 5 years, all 3 of those maniacs are going to have to keep their distance from me and my daughters. Unless they want to face terrible consequences, obviously. I'm still keeping all the security measures that I took in place for a while because the last I saw them, they looked really pissed, and I don't want to risk anything. My daughters and I are attending regular family counseling sessions, and I think that we are going to make a lot of progress in coming few months. We've already made considerable progress. Honestly, all I want now is for my daughters to be happy, and that's it. So please keep sending us your best wishes, we need it. Next story, my soon-to-be ex-wife, who we will call Y, and I got married January 2020. 20 was 22 years at time, and Y was 21. We got married in secret, only our close friends knew. At this time, we were living on campus at our university in Miami, both coming from 2 counties away and where our families lived as well. Soon as we got married, it was a toxic nightmare. For starters, she was secretly texting her ex-boyfriend from Hayes, who we will call Jay. She stated they were just friends now, but this didn't sit right with me as this person was also her first time. I'm not the type of person to go into someone's phone, as I wanted to trust her. However, she started trying her hardest to hide her phone screen from my point of view, and whenever I touched her phone she would go crazy. At some point I was able to figure out her passcode and check her messages. However, I wasn't able to find any proof to follow up on this. Fast forward March 2020, the pandemic hits and everyone is forced to move back home. We were in a weird position as we still haven't told our families, so we wore our rings in secret. Everything was seemingly okay until the first week of April 2020. She just randomly stated she wanted a divorce. It shattered my heart to hear that, as I cried and begged her to stay. I tried asking where did I go wrong, or if I wasn't doing enough for her. She just stated she just didn't love me anymore, and that she wasn't the one for me. For about a week I was trying my best to save our marriage. I was at her mercy to try to make things work out, but she's extremely stubborn. At the end of that rough week, I decided to finally accept that she doesn't want to be with me anymore. It was hard to accept, but I figured we shouldn't drag this along anymore. I only asked for her to return the wedding rings I gave her. However, she refused to give them back as she stated it was a gift from her and she was entitled to keep them. So legally speaking, she may have been right, however I didn't feel like she deserved to keep them as we were no longer going to be together. The rings were real and I was only a payment plan for them for about 3 years, with only 4 months in so far. We argued about this over the phone to the point I hung up and cried to myself in bed. My mother asked what was going on. I confessed everything to her, and she held me in her arms and told me everything was going to be okay. The next day we both went to Yi's home to where we confronted her mother and told the truth to her as well. It became an argument between our mothers, with Y still upstairs refusing to see me but was texting me asking what the hell was going through my mind, get our families involved. It was then agreed by our mothers that the rings would be given back to me but on another day. About 2 days later I get a call while at work from Y. She was crying, stating that her mother was kicking her out because she got married in secret. She stated she still loved me and was willing to give us another try, agreeing to cut off Jay, and that we should move in together and live as a married couple. So being the idiot who was in love at the time, I rushed out of work to meet up with her, and then we immediately started looking into apartments in the area. I was able to get us an apartment that was fairly cheap due to the pandemic, and the move-in date was within 3 days. When I got home, I told my parents the news, and my mother was not happy about this. She explained that I was making a mistake, that I need to rethink all this. My father was disappointed but stated it's my life, my choice. For the next few days, my friends helped me move things from my place, and I barely talked to my parents within those days. It was heartbreaking for my mother the most, and hurt me seeing my mother upset as well. First day in, I felt like our marriage was finally moving in the right direction, and I was finally feeling that happiness I was feeling before she wanted to divorce me. However, that happiness did not last long. A few weeks after moving in, we get invited out for some drinks, and when we got back home, I went through her phone to find conversations between her and a different ex, who we will call E. The messages went as far as around the time she asked for a divorce, and this made my legs crumble. She was passed out on the bed, however I woke her all night by splashing water on her and started screaming at her. She was confused as she was still tipsy, but I was very furious and yelled at her for over 2 to 3 hours. At one point, I demanded her to leave as she was starting to come back to her senses. She began swinging at me and chasing me around the apartment, actually punching me a few times and clawing at me. I'm not a violent person at all. I took the abuse and just locked myself in the room to keep her away from me. She started crying and begging me to forgive her, to the point she was on her knees and stated she would do anything to make up for it. We just began arguing and then slowly talking about this situation through the bedroom door. Eventually, we both calmed down and went to bed, as it was 4 a.m. when this was happening. I didn't sleep, however, and when 7 a.m. came around, she woke up with only half the memory from what happened overnight. I yelled everything back to her again, but this time she was sober enough to know what was going and again pleaded for me to stay. She cried, stating she had nowhere else to go. In that moment, I hated her very much, as I feel she stole me from my family, my friends, and my life. About what I saw in the messages, there was nothing that stated they've done anything physical, at least from what was texted. However, there was conversations that had say all such as her calling ES and E stating they should make a video together, which I still considered cheating. After further arguing, I told her as long as she promises nothing happened between her and E, I better not see her talking to E ever again, or I will leave her this time. She pleaded that nothing ever happened, but during the same conversation I asked if anything had happened between her and Jay. She paused and said no. It was at the moment that made me want to investigate this further. My gut told me this was only the beginning of what was to come next and turn my world upside down. I'll explain more on this another day. Update 1. Following my previous post, we are now in May 2020 when I asked if anything happened between her and Jay, where I reluctantly responded no. The way she answered that made me suspicious. To add on a little bit more, when we first moved in April 2020, I was working at a call center about an hour away from our apartment from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. She was not working due to her job being closed, so I had to start doing Uber Eats, Postmates, and DoorDash, which would usually be 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. after work, or whenever on my days off from work. Also, after the first night we moved in, I was given the cold shoulder from her every night. While I'm at working, she would text me cute things such as her repeatedly say she loves me and waiting for me to come home to cuddle. However, once I got home, she would barely touch me or look at me, which led to my discovery about her and E. Anyways, now we're in June 2020, weeks after the incident. At this point, I'm keeping my distance from her, keeping my same work routine, while also trying to finish college classes online. She was not working yet, but whenever I came home it was never cleaned unless I did it. Around this time she also adopted a mini golden doodle, but when we moved in I brought my Molshi along with us, who she loved dearly, until our doodle came around, also giving him the cold shoulder. For the next few months it's been nothing but the same routine. We tried to talk and go out on dates, but it always ended in silence. I tried to break the ice and see if we can work it out, but she never wanted to express herself. Little by little I felt my love for her going away as I became numb to her treatment towards me. That was until October 2020, when she finally opened up to me. She apologized for her treatment towards me the past few months. So we felt like we were both ready to leave the past behind and just focus on us now. It was us against the world. This felt more powerful when I caught COVID the following month, where she cared for me the way a wife should. She ended up catching it for me once I recovered, and I returned to favor. After that, we started acting more like husband and wife. She finally started getting into my hobbies such as video games, anime art, and photography, even coming along with me during my late-night deliveries where we would vibe out to music and she would help as well. They discovered new things about each other, went on dates, and honestly it felt heartwarming being her presence again. That spark between us was finally coming back, but I still had a secret grudge against her actions as it was hard to move on from it. All was going good until a few days before Valentine's Day 21, where I made another discovery. These past months I still secretly went through her phone every now and then, but honestly never found anything between her and me besides what I already knew. However, I decided this time to take it a step further and look at messages between her and her bestie, who I would constantly send all the gossip to with long messages and screenshots. So going through the messages made my heart sank even more when I found more details about her and Jay. Turns out that Y and J slept together a few days before she asked me for a divorce. And this was actually the true reason for her asking me for the divorce. As I kept reading, turns out Y and J had a conversation sometime in October 2020, I guess for some closure between them, which is why she finally decided to give us a shot. Oddly enough, I was not surprised this time. I woke her up from her nap and just straight up confronted about what I just read in a surprisingly calm tone. She started crying and apologizing about it, and then I just stepped out and went for a drive to clear my mind. For many dark thoughts were going through my head, feeling like I had no one to turn to. For the next few days, I avoided her actions as much as possible. We still slept in the same bed, but there was no physical touch between us. So now Valentine's Day morning, I get a couple of nudges from her in a cutesy tone asking what did I plan for her today. Keep in mind I'm extremely exhausted from work and my deliveries from the whole week, and obviously I'm still heartbroken. She started crying, saying that I didn't plan anything out for her. Once I heard that, I jumped out of bed and began scolding her about how crazy as hell she was to think I would do anything for her after what I just discovered. I yelled at her how she does not deserve anything from, and how our marriage is a total disaster. So you may be wondering why am I even still here with her? Well, at this point in my life, I honestly did not have the energy for anything. I was completely blank, a complete 180 from the person I used to be. I used to be creative, make drawings and paintings, do photography and videography, and always looked forward to the next adventure. But I was hollow, feeling like what's the point of life? I know I'm stupid for this, but I just felt like it was just easier to hide it from the world. We were already so deep into the marriage life that it felt like there was no going back. Because if I did then, what would I do now? It was a dead end for me, and I blame myself for relying on her to make me happy despite also making me the saddest. Doesn't mean I forgave her or anything, I just became more numb. So after this discovery, we again entered another period of keeping our distance. Around April 2021, she took a trip to Peru with her grandmother, and honestly, I was a little excited to have the place to myself for a change. I told my friends the news and they began showing to my place frequently while she was away, not knowing what I know. They made me feel like my old self again, doing our old late-night shenanigans and old activities like game nights, watching movies, or just hanging out. I loved the happiness I was getting back, even if it was for a moment. At the same time, the lease on our apartment was up by the end of May 2021, and I've been speaking to my father about my possibilities. That same month, my mother went up to Chicago to spend time with family members for the remainder of the year, and my dad came up with the idea of letting me and Y stay at their home while he follows her to Chicago. So I agreed, but he wasn't so enthusiastic about it. However, I didn't need her approval. It was either here or having our rent twice the price from before for another year. I moved back in with my parents June 2021. Y is still in Peru but was returning in the next few weeks. I finally felt at home again, moving back into my old room and seeing the layout that represented my spirited youth I once had. So I enjoyed my last few weeks of freedom, but I knew this happiness wasn't going to last forever, as Y finally returned from her trip from Peru. The next part of this story is where crap really hits the fan, almost costing me my life. Update 2, so now it's June-July 2021, Y and I are living at my parents' home. So I started a new job in sales and was able to advance pretty quickly to a supervisor role within 2 to 3 months, which paid well enough to afford my dream car. As for my marriage, we had a steady relationship for the remainder of the year. We had our good and bad moments, but overall it was still a blank feeling I had. So I didn't know what I felt towards Y, whether it was anger, sadness, depression. I just felt like the marriage was just existing for no reason. By the start of 2022, there was a bit of reconciliation between us. Enough for us to start going out on dates again. We opened up more, but we were still wondering where our marriage stood. Everything was seemingly okay until May 2022, where my life flashed before my eyes. So I invited my friends over for a hangout at my parents' place to watch a boxing match. So I told Y about it and stated how it will be only for a few hours and to expect some yelling as we get passionate about sports, and she was okay with it. As the fight kept going, we kept getting louder and louder, to the point she was angrily texting me to keep the noise down. She would come out to grab snacks or use the bathroom, only to keep slamming the door back to the room. After the fight, one of my friend's truck had a dead battery, so I used my car to jump it. So while we're jumping it, the four of us kept conversating for about another half hour. While we were talking, Y demanded me through text to come inside repeatedly, to which I texted back that we're finishing up. As I'm just about to head inside, he storms outside the house and heads to her car. I asked if everything was okay, but she had a very serious look on her face and she angrily pushed me aside. Before leaving to Chicago, my dad installed outdoor solar lights in the front yard. The way Yoi's car was positioned, her only way out was through a grass area that had one of these lights. She revved up her car and before she took off, I tried to stop her from running over the light and asked what was wrong. She paused for about 5 seconds, then stepped hard on the gas and almost ran me over. I jumped out the way as fast as I could, getting grazed on my knee. She drove off fast, dragging the light beneath her car, scraping the road. So I sat on the ground with a surprised look on my face, thinking how she just almost ran me over. My friends helped me up and asked if I was okay. I just looked at them in shock, and they offered their help. I told them just to go home while I went back inside, shaken up from the moment. I kept calling E's phone to see why she did what she did. I go inside our room, the find her phone on the ground unlocked. I go through the phone for the first time in months, and turns out there were still secrets to find out about Y. Turns out Y and J actually had a continuous affair for months, ranging from March 2020 to October 2020. I finally felt something in my heart and brain to do what needed to be done a long time ago. It's about 2 a.m. I was still freaking out about this incident. I repeatedly called my sister, who lives down the road from me, about what just happened but with no response. So she returns and tries to enter the home, but I managed to lock the door with an additional lock. So I sneak out to the back and drive over to my sister's house while hyperventilating as Y pursued me. I get to my sister's house knocking, but as Y pulled up in the driveway, I began knocking frantically as my sister and her husband finally opened the door. This caused I to back off and drive away. I explained the situation to my sister and cried to her about what just happened and finally opened about how she cheated on me in the past. It was a hard pill to swallow, but I was ready to finally let this marriage go. I asked her to accompany back home to make sure Y doesn't try to hurt me again. When we get there, Y was already packing up her belongings. I kept my distance for about 5 minutes, then asked her to give me back the rings and the keys. She already expected this as she had them in her pocket, already gave them to me. She grabbed her suitcase and took our golden doodle with her. My sister and I talked a bit longer, and then she finally goes home. That night was a long one for me. I slept at about 6 a.m. only to be woken up about 7 a.m. to knocking on my window from Y. She spent the remainder of the night in her car and asked if I could at least take back the golden doodle inside. As much as I wanted to, I ignored her knocking. This went on for about 30 minutes. Later on, I reached out and met up with her to talk about the situation. I finally told her about everything I knew and decided it better for us to separate. She cried and begged me to let us work this out, but I was tired of the emotional and physical abuse all these years, the lies, the heartbreaks, everything. As toxic as it sounds, what followed afterwards for UI was actually satisfying as I felt like I was karma for everything she has put me through. So I will sound like a crap in the next part, but I believe I deserve a genuine laughter for once. Update 3, Y moves back in with her mother. But not for long, as she does not get along with her stepfather and has too much pride to be living under her mother's roof again. She ends up finding her own place August 2022, stating that if I ever wanted to make it work out, I was always welcome to move back in with her. My parents came back from Chicago about a week after we separated. A majority of the furniture in our bedroom was hers, as she made me throw out my items such as my bed and drawers and replace them with hers as it looked more classy. Besides the bedroom, we had a couch, tables, kitchen appliances, etc., all boxed away in another room in the house. The day she told me she was coming to take her belongings, my father and I left everything out in the driveway, but did not bother to help them move anything into the truck. She brought along her mother, stepfather, her uncle, and her 2 aunts, who I would say are not all physically strong people. So her grandma was also there to mostly watch but help with little things to move. So it took my father and I about 30 minutes to move and maneuver out the house. Took them 2 to 3 hours to put in a truck. 3 peeped through the window, having a few drinks, and laughed about how they were struggling while they were all talking crap about me and my family. So I don't know why they included my family, but then again, they're a family who talk crap about everyone and everything. When Y moved into her apartment, she was working a new job she got through her field of study, which paid well by the hour but didn't get an hours. She had too much pride to work a second job as she felt like this was below her. Because of this, she struggled to keep up with her rent, electricity, water bill, car payments, insurance, etc. She reached out to me a couple times asking for money, but I refused to help her as I felt like her financial problems had nothing to do with me. She would try to gaslight me to give her money, saying I shouldn't let our golden doodle suffer along with her, which I replied that she should go ask her lover for money. I was surprised to learn later on that she told her mother the truth, and her mother took my side and stated she would not be giving her money either. The rest of her family still hated me for not wanting to work it out after she cheated, but their opinions don't matter because none of them are married themselves. Months went by, we were still legally married. I agreed to go half on the divorce fees, but did not have the money. During these discussions, she admitted she still had hope for us to work it out as she still had love for me, and believed I still loved her back. Call me stupid. But I did love her back, but I just knew I couldn't keep playing this game anymore. Despite everything she's done to me, it was still hard for me to hate her as this is someone I've grew close with in high school, who's helped me when I was at my lowest point in life and made me happier than anyone else ever could. Yet she still managed to break me and made me feel like I will never be good enough for anyone ever again. We still have each other on social media, and even though she claims to be struggling with money, she always seems to be out every weekend at the clubs. This usually ends up with her drunk texting or calling me, stating she was wrong for how she treated me. Whenever I post on my IG or Snapchat stories about being out late at night, she's usually the first to see my posts, usually within a minute. She acknowledges that I look happier without her. As of now, I wouldn't say happy, but I do feel like this is freedom. Since moving out, she's gotten into 2 car accidents just a few months apart. We're no longer on the same insurance together, but she still called me asking if I can financially help her, which I refused and told her she was on her own now. So I still had her on my phone plan a few months after, but decided to disconnect her line without letting her know. To once reconnected, she angrily texted me days later about how she lost her number and had to get a new phone because her current phone was still locked with my carrier, and she couldn't call to unlock it since I was the account holder. She called me a crap and I couldn't help but laugh about it. I have this ex-girlfriend that I ended off on good terms with. We were friends until Y and I got married, where she forced me to cut off my friendship with her out of fear that my ex would try to get with me again. Though we started hanging out again, and when Y found out, she swears that I only divorced her to get back with my ex. I had no interest in her after the breakup, only seeing her as a friend at this point, even after Y and I separated. From what I heard from a mutual friend, she tried to get back E, who now has a girlfriend and a child. She also tried again with J, who now has a girlfriend. Would sometimes reach out to me about how she's still behind on certain bills, would barely eat, almost got evicted twice, and can't afford to care for the golden doodle. If I had to guess, she's most likely getting money from her grandmother. We would still text time to time to figure out a court date or days where I still had to give some leftover stuff from home. She would always say she would never find a guy like me and how much she wishes we could try again and regrets her actions. Part of this made me feel happy for karma, the other part would be feeling sad about how everything led up to this moment. Around March 2023, we went to court to finally file our divorce. So while waiting for our turn, she stepped out and hauled a cry her eyes out, while I just sat there not knowing what to think. After about 10 minutes, it's finally our turn and we began signing away. Ever since then, we just now talk with a few texts once everywhere 1 to 2 weeks, saying what we have left to say. As for myself, I was promoted to manager a month after we separated. I stayed in this position until November 2022, as I was overworked to the point of getting no sleep. I was able to find a better paying job, one that I continue to work for to this day. During the marriage, I've gained weight from overeating to help cope with my depression. I've been going back to the gym, but need to work on getting a routine. I have big plans with my friends for the summer and myself for later this year. It's now June 2023. I wouldn't say life is perfect, but whenever I'm having a bad day, I think about how Y's life is basically falling apart now ever since we parted ways. That makes me feel like she deserves to feel what I felt for 6+ years. I'm an idiot for thinking this way about her, but at least my life is finally going in the right direction and hopefully continues that way, and she could see how happy I could be without her. For update 4, this is my last post about this, just for a few clarifications. I had to cut this section out of part 4 to be able to post it. If there's any other questions, I can try answer them as well. The history of Y and I dates back to our high school days. There's more details about how Y and I first met up to the point where we got married. Looking back on it, we always had a toxic relationship, but that's to say it was all bad as we had our great moments as well. As for how our boyfriend-girlfriend relationship went and why I married her, I'll explain that another time if necessary. I appreciate the feedback, both good and bad. Like I said before, I was a dumb crap who thought everything would magically work out, so I don't know if I would call this outcome a win for me, but at least I can finally start over now. To the readers that think this is made up, I don't have the time to come up with a story like this. I'm posting my experience as a way for me to get this off my chest. I'm not the best when it comes to expressing myself in person, and Reddit probably isn't the best place to do it, but posting here with other people who had similar experiences made it easier for me. But thanks for still actually reading all these long posts. Sadly, this isn't my first rodeo. There's a relationship I had before this that broke me and made me who I am today. Sounds dramatic, but that's the best way to put it. I'm open to talking about it one day. Update 5. Today I'm going to court to meet up with my wife, who we're calling Yai. She texted me Monday, June 26th to remind me we have court today, June 30th. So yesterday she gave me one more reminder and also asked for a few things I still had left from her. I asked for some things as well. We still have each other on social media where we still see each other's stories. I don't snoop or anything, I just happen to see it when I'm seeing other stories. I suppose she has a sort of new boyfriend now, or at least is working up to it. She's been posting text messages between her and the same guy. I don't think it's to get me jealous or anything, but knowing her, she likes the attention from other people as she did the same thing when her and I were becoming a thing. But I don't feel any jealousy or hate towards her. I'm actually relieved she's moving on. The way I see it, someone else is taking over my old problems. They have no idea what type of hell they're getting into. All I can say is good luck, they're going to need it. As for court, I actually feel excited about it. I can continue to move on with my life and she can finally be out the picture. She stated that even after the divorce we can still be friends. Mostly because of the golden doodle we have together. Despite me loving that dog, I have to let this all go. After we finalize everything, I will block her on everything so I don't have to see or hear about her again. As for myself, I haven't tried to meet anyone new. I don't really have it in me to try again. Main thing holding me back is the trust issues and my own insecurities. Usually when I've been in a relationship, it's always been the female that made the first move on me, including why. I should really change that though. But for right now, my main focus is work and bills that I'm close to paying off. One of my friends is now training me at the gym. So far, I've lost 10 pounds. My friend group and I are going on our summer trip next week. We have multiple locations to drop by within our state. So yeah, life is good so far and I'll try to update how the court went afterwards. Update 6, sorry for the late update. I've been working overtime like crazy, but today I have time. On Friday, June 30th, we get to the courthouse and wait for our turn with a clerk. After like 3 minutes, we get called and there's only one chair for us to sit down. So I take the chair for myself, and even though I'm not looking at her, I can feel why staring at me hard. She says, "Can I at least sit down?" To which I respond, "Then grab a chair," and she just says whatever and stands up. We explain the reason for divorce. We're not fighting for anything, just simply separating. A couple times, the lady had to walk back and forth or type something in the computer. During those moments, she would say little remarks like she can't wait to get rid of me, that it was me who trapped her into a marriage, and that I never satisfied her, etc. Not to sound crappy, but I know she was saying most of that stuff to mask what she really felt. I know this because she followed up that she hopes I have fun with my ex, who we're still friends, but like I said before, I have no interest in, but she swears I'm in love with. So while we kept going back and forth, the clerk was trying so hard not to laugh. We pay the fee and now we just have one more court date in 1 to 2 months. So it was raining when we walked out, so we still discussed a few things. Main thing, she asked if I could watch our golden doodle in August while she goes to her trip out the country. I said not possible for me, and she followed that I'm a deadbeat dog dad and that I will never see him again and left. So here's the kicker. Yesterday, I asked if I can watch the golden doodle for today, to which I can't because I work today, even though it's 4th of July. Ah, right. So also, today is her birthday. She won't be getting a happy birthday from me though. Also, family does not celebrate birthdays, especially her mother and stepfather, because they're both JDUs. Her only real option is her friend, who's most likely going to do something with her boyfriend rather than UI. So yeah, now I'm at work, waiting 2 more days before vacation. Nothing really different going on from the last update.